If you thought you'd seen it all, think again. Tonight, the internet hit pause as whispers turned into headlines and a private moment went public. Chrisean rock breaks down on camera, while reports tied to Junior's brains can ripple across timelines, group chats, and blogs that live for chaos. The internet couldn't believe it, and you won't either. This is Hood Files, where secrets explode before your eyes. Names start flying. Screenshots start circulating. And suddenly the tone changes. No jokes, no deflection, just pressure, real pressure. The kind that makes even the loudest rooms go quiet. People ask the same question in 1,000 comments. If this is real, what happens next? Because this isn't just another clip. It's a story about visibility, denial, and what happens when receipts refuse to stay buried. Alleged documents, conflicting reactions, friends who go silent, strangers who claim they warned everyone months ago. Bro said too much, and now everyone's watching. So let me ask you this. If you were in this position, same spotlight, same threat, same scrutiny, what would you do? Run? Laugh it off? Or finally face it? Stay right here. We're breaking it all down. And trust me, it gets uglier from here. They say the loudest moments usually come right before the silence. And that's exactly where the story begins. For years, Chrisean Rock lived online like nothing could touch her. Chaos followed her. Controversy chased her. But somehow she always moved like the rules bent around her, laughing through criticism, mocking concern, turning every warning into a punchline, until suddenly the tone shifted. Not gradually, not politely. It snapped. The first sign wasn't a headline. It was hesitation. A pause where there used to be jokes. A look that didn't match the words coming out of her mouth. People who watched her for years noticed it immediately. Same lives, same phone camera, same room, but the energy was different, heavier, like something had followed her home and refused to leave. At the center of it all was Junior. From the moment he was born, the internet treated him like a symbol instead of a child. Every clip dissected, every sound analyzed, every moment slowed down and replayed by strangers who felt entitled to answers. Some claimed concern, others chased clout, and Crow brushed it all off the same way every time. Y'all are weird. Y'all don't know me. Y'all don't know my son. And for a while, that worked. Because in influencer culture, confidence often passes for truth. If you say something loud enough, long enough, people stop questioning it. Especially when the person saying it has millions of eyes on them and an audience trained to defend first and think later. Crow had that. Ride or die fans. Comment sections that turned into battlefields. Anyone who raised a question was labeled a hater. Anyone who mentioned doctors was accused of preying on a child for clicks. But the warnings never stopped. They just went underground. Parents, nurses, speech therapists, people who didn't want attention, just answers.
He had severe cerebral palsy and fetal alcohol syndrome. This is why his voice is so high-pitched. The reason he always seems congested is because the things he consumes goes into his lungs instead of his stomach. This is why he can't eat solid. This is also why he's struggling to gain.
They typed carefully at first, then louder, then with frustration. I'm not diagnosing, but became a common phrase. So did I've seen this before. Clips started getting saved instead of argued over. Screen recordings replaced comment wars. People weren't trying to win debates anymore. They were documenting patterns. And Crow kept going live. She joked through congestion. She laughed through gasping sounds. She waved off concern like it was jealousy in disguise. When viewers begged her to log off and check on Junior, she stayed live longer, almost defiant, almost like she needed the audience there as witnesses. Because once you turn the camera off, you're alone with whatever the truth is. Then came the rumors, not from blogs, not from reaction channels, from people claiming proximity, family members, friends of friends, names no one recognized, but stories that all sounded uncomfortably similar. Whispers about appointments, missed follow-ups, paperwork that existed but wasn't being shown. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, just enough smoke to make people start looking for fire. The phrase that changed everything was simple: brain scan. No images were posted. No official documents verified. Just claims that reports existed and were being talked about behind the scenes. And suddenly, Crow wasn't laughing anymore. She wasn't clapping back. She wasn't dragging commenters. She was defensive in a quieter way. Shorter answers. Longer stares. That's when people knew something had shifted. Because Crow never did quiet. Old clips resurfaced overnight. Not edited. Not remixed. Just re-uploaded with timestamps. Junior breathing heavily on a live. Crow saying he's laughing. Junior congested for weeks. Crow saying it's allergies. A breathing device people swear they saw in the background months ago. Back then, it was chaos content. Now it looked like context. The internet doesn't forget, but it does change its mind. Suddenly, the same fans who once spammed laughing emojis were asking careful questions, not accusations. Questions. Why does he always sound like that? Why is he always being held? Why does she get angry when doctors are mentioned? Why does every suggestion feel like an attack? Crow noticed. You could hear it in her voice. That edge, that irritation that wasn't playful anymore. When someone sent her a children's book designed to support parents raising kids with special needs, she snapped. Called it weird, disrespectful, an insult. The reaction was instant and loud. Not because of what she said, but because of how hard she pushed back. People replayed that clip more than any other, because confidence doesn't usually look that defensive. At the same time, the internet started connecting dots it probably shouldn't have, but always does. Pregnancy lives, drinking clips, smoking jokes, moments that were once brushed off as trolling bait, now carried weight they didn't before. Again, no proof, just patterns. And patterns make people uncomfortable. The pressure didn't just live online. It followed Crow into interviews, into conversations, into rooms where the questions were no longer playful. And then someone asked Blueface the question everyone had been whispering for months. Was Junior's child? The line went dead. No denial. No rant. No insult. Just silence. And for someone known for chaos, that silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. Clips of the hang-up went viral within minutes. Comment sections exploded, not with answers, but with speculation. That's when the story stopped being about one person. It became about systems, responsibility, who steps in when a child is growing up in public chaos. People started saying the same 3 letters over and over again. CPS, not as a threat, as a question. If everyone can see this, why hasn't anything happened? No one had proof. No one had confirmation. Just a feeling that something wasn't adding up, that the jokes were gone, that the energy had changed. That Crow looked tired in a way makeup couldn't fix. And right as the conversation reached its loudest point, the rumors shifted. From whispers to claims that documents were circulating privately. Not posted, not leaked publicly, but talked about. Enough to scare people close to the situation. Enough to make Crow break down on camera in a way she never had before. She cried, but not like someone playing victim. Like someone cornered by reality. She couldn't laugh away anymore. The moment the rumors stopped sounding like gossip and started sounding organized, everything accelerated. What used to be scattered comments suddenly lined up into threads. Timelines appeared. Screenshots were dated. People weren't yelling anymore. They were cross-referencing. That's when the story shifted from chaos to scrutiny. And scrutiny doesn't care how famous you are. It only cares whether the pieces fit. According to multiple online accounts, alleged brain scan reports weren't just being mentioned casually anymore. They were being described with detail. Not enough to prove anything, but enough to scare people who understood how documentation works when things move beyond the internet. Behind the scenes, blogs began hinting that conversations were happening privately. Not posts, not leaks, conversations. Group chats where people compared notes and realized they were hearing the same things from different directions. Anonymous sources claimed appointments had been discussed months earlier, that referrals had been suggested, that follow-ups were expected. Again, nothing confirmed, but the consistency raised eyebrows. When different people tell the same story without coordinating, It starts to feel less like rumor and more like repetition. This is where the fan base fractured. Loyalists stayed loud, insisting the internet was projecting, but others went quiet and started watching differently. Old footage took on new meaning, not as proof, but as pattern. The way Junior was always congested. The way feeding moments were rarely shown. The way questions about doctors were always met with anger instead of reassurance. People weren't diagnosing. They were asking why normal questions felt forbidden. The commentary grew sharper. Nurses chimed in carefully, choosing words like concern and monitoring. Parents shared personal experiences without naming conditions. Speech therapists talked about red flags without pointing fingers. The disclaimer was always the same. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but the warning underneath was loud. Ignoring certain signs could be dangerous. And that's what made the alleged reports so explosive. Because once paperwork enters a conversation, intentions stop matching. Meanwhile, Chrisean Rock was unraveling in real time, not in a dramatic meltdown way. In a pressured, defensive way. She started snapping at the wrong people. Fans noticed she responded more harshly to concern than to hate. That distinction mattered. When someone sent resources, she felt attacked. When someone sent jokes, she brushed them off. Viewers clocked it instantly. The energy didn't match the situation anymore. Then came the family voices. Not interviews, not statements. Side comments. Lives that felt too raw to be scripted. Relatives allegedly hinted that things were worse offline. That Junior wasn't gaining weight like he should. That feeding had become a struggle. Again, no documents shown. Just people who sounded tired of protecting a narrative that wasn't holding up. When family starts talking publicly, it usually means private conversations already failed. The internet reacted fast. Not with jokes, with fear. Clips of Junior breathing heavily circulated again, but this time with captions that said, "Listen closely." Parents said the sound made their stomach drop. Medical workers explained, in general terms, why breathing difficulties in toddlers can escalate quickly if ignored. The comments weren't cruel. They were urgent. And what shocked viewers most was that Crow stayed live through it all. She didn't log off. She didn't step away. She argued instead. That decision backfired. Because the longer she stayed live, the more everything looked documented. Viewers started timestamping moments instead of reacting emotionally. At 12:43, he gasps. At 18:02, she laughs it off. The shift from outrage to archiving was subtle but deadly. That's when the narrative stopped being about opinion and started being about record. As pressure mounted, attention swung back to Blueface. His silence had already fueled speculation, but his follow-up comments made things worse. Talking about low success rates and co-parenting sounded cold to an audience already on edge. No reassurance, no clarity, just distance. People read into it the way the internet always does. If he wasn't fighting the rumors, maybe he was avoiding them. Blogs framed it as collapse. Reaction channels framed it as exposure. Fans framed it as betrayal. Everyone framed it differently, but the center stayed the same. Junior, a child caught between two public figures more focused on control than coordination. And once that framing took hold, every old clip got reinterpreted through that lens. The smoking jokes during pregnancy resurfaced. The drinking clips, moments once defended as exaggeration, now set uncomfortably in timelines. Not as proof, as context. The internet does this thing where it builds stories backward. It takes the ending and works its way to the beginning, looking for foreshadowing. And suddenly, everything felt like foreshadowing. The most disturbing shift wasn't anger. It was calm. The comment sections slowed down. People stopped arguing. They started saying things like, "This doesn't feel funny anymore." When outrage dies and concern replaces it, that's when stories cross a line. The phrase, "someone needs to step in," appeared more often, not as a threat, as a plea. Behind the scenes, anonymous users claimed that if the alleged scans were real, timelines mattered. Who knew what and when, what advice was given, what was ignored. That's how legal conversations start. Quietly, methodically, not with arrests, but with questions. And once those questions exist, denial becomes harder to sell. Crow tried to regain control. She doubled down, insisted nothing was wrong, rejected help publicly. The more she insisted, the less convincing it sounded. Viewers remembered she'd previously said Junior was in therapy, then acted offended when therapy was mentioned again. The contradiction didn't need explanation. It spoke for itself. And just when it seemed like the storm might slow, another voice entered the picture. Crow's sister went live and said things no one expected to hear. Claims about fear, about instability, about neglect. Whether true or not, the damage was immediate. Family testimony hits different. It doesn't feel like clout. It feels like last resort. At that moment, the narrative cracked wide open. This stopped being about internet drama and started looking like a file being built in public, clip by clip, statement by statement. And as viewers realized what they were watching, the question changed again. Not is this real, but what happens next? Because once stories reach this point, they don't rewind. And what came next pushed everything into a territory no one was ready for. By the time the sisters' claims finished circulating, the internet wasn't loud anymore. It was methodical. Screenshots were saved. Lives were clipped. Dates were written down. People stopped reacting in real time and started building folders. That's the moment the story crossed its final line. Because outrage fades, but documentation doesn't. And once the narrative shifts from "did you see this?" to "save this," the outcome usually changes. What scared people most wasn't any single clip. It was a consistency. Junior always being held, rarely placed on the floor to play, almost never seen interacting with toys or exploring the way toddlers usually do. Always moving, always traveling, always in noise. Parents online pointed out that children with developmental challenges often need routine, therapy, schedules, and calm environments. What they saw instead was instability. And instability doesn't show up on a scan. It shows up over time. Old visuals came back into rotation, but this time without captions or commentary, just raw footage. Junior wearing heavy boots on visibly stiff feet. Junior riding in a car without a visible car seat. Junior laid on a gym floor while Crow worked out nearby. Moments that once felt chaotic now felt uncomfortable. Not because people wanted them to be, but because context had changed. The internet hadn't rewritten the clips. It had rewatched them. As concern deepened, some users with medical backgrounds began explaining things cautiously. Not diagnoses, never diagnoses, just general information. How certain neurological challenges can present. How feeding issues can be dangerous if unmanaged. How repeated respiratory distress isn't something to laugh off. They use disclaimers. They beg people not to jump to conclusions, but they also beg someone to intervene, because ignoring warning signs doesn't make them disappear. Crow noticed a shift. Her lies became shorter, her tone more aggressive. She framed concern as betrayal, support as disrespect. She insisted people were preying on her downfall instead of caring about her child. And to her credit, the pressure was immense. Being judged by millions is enough to break anyone. But that didn't stop the recording. It never does. Then came the clip that changed how even her supporters felt. A moment where she said she sometimes wished she never had Junior because of the evil surrounding his father and family. The room went quiet online. Not shocked, uncomfortable. That wasn't a soundbite meant for engagement. It was a crack, and cracks make people look closer. From there, the conversation hardened, not into cruelty, into concern that no longer cared about Crow's feelings. Because when children are involved, sympathy shifts fast. People stopped centering her pain and started centering Junior's safety. The question became unavoidable. Was early intervention missed? And if so, was it ignorance, denial, or something worse? Meanwhile, Blueface remained distant. He denied abandoning Junior, but framed his absence as a refusal to deal with Crow, not a commitment to co-parenting. To the public, that distinction didn't matter. What they saw was a child in the middle of two adults locked in conflict while responsibility bounced between them. Silence from him didn't calm anything. It amplified the uncertainty. Reddit threads grew longer. Timelines became more detailed. Users compared live dates with alleged appointments. They noted when medical conversations were deflected. They tracked how long certain symptoms had been visible. None of it was verified, but the sheer volume made it impossible to dismiss as a few trolls. Too many people had noticed the same things independently. That's when the fear set in. Not the viral kind, the quiet kind, the kind that makes people say, I hope we're wrong, because no one wants to be right about something like this. No one wants a child to be suffering while the world watches. But hope doesn't erase responsibility, and concern doesn't wait for permission. The alleged brain scan reports were never posted publicly. That fact mattered, because it meant the conversation wasn't being driven by proof, but by reaction to what people believed existed. And belief can be just as powerful as evidence when it changes behavior. Crow wasn't acting like someone untouched anymore. She was acting like someone under pressure. Viewers noticed her body language, the way she scanned comments instead of performing for them, the way she bristled at specific questions, the way she repeated the same denials without adding reassurance. It didn't feel like confidence. It felt like containment. As days passed, fans stopped asking what was wrong and started asking who knew, who saw what, who advised what, and when. Those questions don't come from drama. They come from legal thinking. Even if no case exists, the logic is the same. Paper trails matter. Timelines matter. Silence matters. And then something else changed. Family members who had spoken emotionally before now sounded resigned, like people who believed the ending was already written. That tone scared viewers more than any allegation, because resignation doesn't chase attention. It comes from exhaustion. At this point, the story stopped belonging to Crow. It belonged to the internet she built her life in. The same platform that gave her fame was now archiving her past, not to destroy her, but to understand what happened in plain sight. Some supporters still tried to soften the narrative. They replayed early clips, saying Junior was just a baby back then. But time doesn't stop moving. Junior is older now, and the same issues people flagged early appeared unchanged. Breathing, feeding, stiffness. Patterns don't age out. They evolve. That's why the outrage never fully returned. Because this didn't feel like cancellation. It felt like concern reaching its breaking point. Fans weren't asking for Crow to be punished. They were asking for someone to step in before things became irreversible. And that's where the story leaves us. Not with answers. With questions that refuse to go away. Were warnings ignored long enough to cross into dangerous territory? Did denial delay help? Or is this all a tragic misunderstanding amplified by the internet's hunger for drama? What's certain is this. Once stories reach this stage, they don't disappear. Clips don't unexist. Statements don't unsay themselves. And silence, especially when documentation exists, grows louder with time. Crow hasn't vanished. She's still there, still posting, still pushing back. But the world watching her has changed. The laughter is gone. The jokes are gone. What remains is a collective pause, a waiting room feeling, like everyone knows the next update won't be light. Because whether the alleged reports are real or not, something very real already happened. The internet stopped seeing chaos and started seeing consequence. And once that switch flips, there's no going back. So now the only question left isn't about rumors or scans or lives. It's this: does this end with another denial and another stream, or with someone finally stepping in before the story writes its own ending? Because if there's one thing the internet has proven over and over again, it's this. When people stop reacting and start recording, the truth usually shows up sooner or later, before you click away. Sit with this for a second, because stories like this don't explode all at once. They unfold quietly in pieces, while everyone's distracted by noise. What you just heard isn't about picking sides or chasing drama. It's about what happens when public lives collide with private responsibility, and the internet becomes the only place left asking questions. This wasn't built on one clip, or one rumor, or one reaction. It was built on patterns people couldn't unsee anymore. Moments that didn't age out. Statements that didn't line up. Silence that spoke louder than words. And once those pieces start stacking, they don't just disappear because someone says, "Leave me alone." Here's the uncomfortable part. Most stories like this don't end with a big reveal. They end with hindsight, with people saying, "We saw it, we just didn't know what to do." And by the time clarity arrives, it's usually late. So now the question isn't whether the internet went too far. The question is whether the internet was the only place left paying attention. Because when concern turns into documentation, it means trust has already broken somewhere behind scenes. What do you think this really turns into? Another denial? Another lie? Another cycle of outrage and silence? Or does someone finally step in before this story writes an ending no one wants to see? Drop your thoughts in the comments, not with hate, not with jokes, but with honesty. If you've been following this from the beginning, say what stood out to you. If you just arrived, say what made you pause. Hit that like button if you believe conversations like this matter, even when they're uncomfortable. Subscribe if you want the full timelines, the context, and the updates others won't slow down enough to explain. And turn on notifications, because this story isn't fading. It's evolving. We'll be watching closely, because some stories don't need hype. They need attention.